So, welcome to Menable Matters on this Mental Health Awareness Week 2023. This particular series of Menable Matters podcasts is brought to you in association with Jardine Motors Group. And all of this week, we are featuring key people from around their business who are going to share with us their story and situations that they've been involved in and how they themselves and the people around them are navigating the whole area of well-being and mental health in the industry. I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by Paul Westaway. Paul, how are you, sir?
I'm very good, thanks, Stephen. Good to be here.
That's great to have you here. And in good old Menable Matters even fashion, could I ask you to give us a little bit of an intro as to who you are, where you're from, and what you do? And if you want to make that last about 30 minutes, that'd be brilliant.
Only 30 minutes. Okay, all right. To cut a few bits out then. Yeah. No, of course, no problem at all. So yeah, as you said, I'm Paul Westaway. I'm the HLS brand director within Jardine Motors. HLS means very little to anybody, but within our business, it stands for high luxury. So I am fortunate and lucky enough to look after the top end brands that we represent, and they include Porsche, Ferrari, McLaren, Aston Martin, Pininfarina, and most recently Ineos as well. I've been in the industry for about 26 years altogether. I was an engineering graduate. I was a graduate of Imperial College in London before I joined this industry, and I've been in the luxury side of things for 19 years.
Wow. Okay. I was going to say 26 years. You joined when you were 10 then, Paul.
Oh, bless you. You're very kind.
See what I did there?
Yeah, so you did. Yeah, I think you need to adjust the contrast on your camera. Yeah.
All right. So how come you went from engineering and I mean, I suppose there is a bit of a link, but what drew you into the automotive industry and obviously specifically on the kind of sales and then the leadership side? How did that happen?
It's a funny story, actually. I mean, I loved engineering. I went into it because my dad was an engineer. We traveled the world when I was young. He worked on a lot of different projects. Graduated from Imperial, loved my time at uni, did 3 years in engineering and realized that I actually didn't like it. I wasn't particularly enthused about getting up in the morning and going to work. And I think there's definitely something in it that says if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And I think I didn't really realize it at the time, but I've always loved cars. I used to buy Autocar every week. I used to have posters of Lamborghinis on my bedroom wall, and Ferraris and various other things. And I've sort of thought, well, that's an industry. I love cars. I always have done. Maybe I should go and do that. But no one would give me a job. So I went to go for an interview at BMW dealer in Slough, and spent an hour being interviewed by the then dealer principal. Before we both realised he was interviewing me for the wrong job. I kept I thought firing zingers of answers of questions to him, and he kept looking disappointed. And I realised he thought I was going for a sales exec job, and I was actually going for a service advisor job. So we both agreed. I think he felt pity for me more than anything, so he gave me a job. And the one thing I love about this industry, and anyone who looks to join it today, is the same thing I say: is that in our industry, if you work hard and you try and you kind of show that you're willing to give things a go, generally you can move really well through this industry, and that's served me really well. And I've been very lucky also that I've worked for some great bosses who've kind of given me a chance to switch specialisms and move in different parts of the business as I've gone along, and that's kind of got me to where I am today. So no, I don't know where all those years have gone, but it's been a real ride. I have to say, I've loved every minute of it. So
yeah, no, that sounds great. Now you mentioned two roles there, sales and service advisors. Now I know for me, from my experience, which of those two is the most stressful and carries the most anxiety. And the theme for Mental Health Awareness Week this year is anxiety. So from the perspective of those two roles that you've sort of experienced firsthand, what would you say are the stresses and anxieties typically in those fields, if you like, those particular roles?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I think if we take the service side of things first, I have a constant admiration for the guys and girls that work in our business on the after sales side of things, because it is a pretty thankless job. You're not you pay a lot of money to have your car serviced or fixed, and it doesn't look any different other than it's hopefully been cleaned before you get it back.
Yeah.
So I used to sort of say that a good day was a day where you didn't deliver any bad news, and no one kind of shouted at you and told you, what they thought of you. And that makes it a tough job, because you don't get necessarily affirmation. What you're getting is, you're trying to make the experience as best you can, but the feedback you get is not necessarily great. And I think it therefore needs, from us as leaders in our business, we constantly need to be letting those teams know that they're doing a really good job, and making sure they understand that they are massively appreciated for the roles that they carry out. And I think to a certain extent also you're quite helpless in that role, because a lot of the dramas and problems that happen aren't necessarily of your making. They're a result of something that's happened that's outside of your control, and often outside the business's control. So I think that makes it really tough, and that job is not for everyone, and it's also not a job necessarily that you would maybe not want to do for a long time. Some people are brilliant at it, and that's just they like doing it, they like the technical side of it, and they're great at it. But my view, certainly with that team, is it's the team we always sort of doff our cap to and say, you're doing a great job for us. The sales side of thing is different. The sales side of thing, I think, comes with more pressure of personal performance. You're kind of, it's down to you to put food on the table. It's your at the end of the day, you're the last person that's going to make the client buy or not buy. And so it brings a different kind of pressure. But what it doesn't bring is perhaps the thankless element that the after sales side of the business does, because ultimately, who's not going to get excited about taking delivery of their new Porsche if the client isn't doing that? Fundamentally, we've either done something really wrong, or you've got to question why they would buy that car in the first place. So I think for our teams who work in sales, it's a different kind of pressure. But there isn't a role in our business that doesn't come with some form of pressure. So I don't underestimate it. And we also see with some of those guys and girls where they're performing really well, and all of a sudden they'll have a 3-month block where just nothing goes their way, and then it's about making sure that they know you're doing everything you can. Sometimes you just get a run like that. So it's bad luck. It's for whatever reason, the things don't fall your way, and it's about making sure we just keep them calm, keep them reassured that it will happen for them. The fundamentals of what makes you good at your job never change. It doesn't. You don't become bad at your job. Sometimes you just need to make sure your confidence is there, and that's our job as leaders, is to make sure all of our teams feel that confidence and support.
And I guess contradicting myself here a little bit, but if the one constant that sort of applies to all of us is that outside of work, of course, we all have other stuff going on, our personal lives and our other bits and pieces. So, as you've come through the industry and through the business, and obviously now in a senior leadership position, what are some of the stresses and strains that you've experienced, either personally or, from the people around you that have kind of impacted, across the teams, really?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. When I started in my first sort of management role, we never talked really, I'm talking now in the sort of late 90s. We never really talked about the crucial element of what's going on behind the scenes with individuals. It was about what was going on at work, where was the performance, and there was never really a link made with actually what's going on for that person outside of work. And when you look back on it now and some of the issues that we faced, it was abundantly clear through the lens of what I see now that there were other things going on, but it was either almost perceived that, well, that's not our business to talk about that. I remember the phrase, don't bring your problems to work, and it's
leave it at the door, wasn't it? That was the
how'd you do that then? Show me that trick. And I think that's when we fast forward to where we are now, and we're in a different world now. The issues are different. With the younger members of our team, the issues around social media, how they feel they should be seen to be living their lives versus how they actually are living their lives, I think causes big issues there. So I think what I've seen now is that whenever we approach a challenge with one of our team, is we look at both things are linked together. We look at the individual. Home and work are inseparable, and we talk about now the individuals may not want to open up, but we really open the door for it and say, look, talk to us. How can we help in both areas through any form of pastoral care, anything we can do to help them? And some people, and probably a bit generational, some people also are brought up of I can't talk about it, but we try and unlock it, because I think the stigma is slowly drifting away now, particularly within men, certainly, where I think perhaps there has been more of a stigma about showing your softer side. It makes a massive difference. If we can unlock it, generally we can help fix it.
Yeah, yeah. And we were talking prior to recording, weren't we? That as we, both of us have, in our experiences, have seen and heard and dealt with, lots and lots of different things. So I guess as you get more senior, I suppose you kind of lose that element of surprise, if you know what I mean. That nothing shocks you anymore.
Yeah, I say that, and then every now and again something else happens, and you go, no, that has shocked me. Yeah, I really wasn't expecting that, but I really I hope those days don't come anymore. I have to say, but
Yeah,
no, I mean, we've certainly, historically in previous roles, we've had some real life-changing situations for individuals, and I think at the time, in some respects, that's helped me. It's helped me realise that it's forced us to consider, because it's been such a big issue, what's happened, the things that have happened outside of work, how it has clearly impacted the individual. And I think even without formal training, obviously Jardine's been really good with the mental health first aid training that we do. Sometimes you look back and go, well, actually, I sort of stumbled upon a way of helping with that without necessarily now realizing I was perhaps adopting one of the techniques from that training to help that individual and their family. And I think that's another point, is that the way I approach this is we don't thank the individual, we don't help the individual, we help the family. That we're a family.
Right.
If we're going to help someone, it's about making sure that that individual knows that we're there to support them and their family. When we do some presents at Christmas, when I do them for my team, I send presents to their partners. I don't send presents to them. We do enough for our own team. It's about saying thank you to their significant other for what the sacrifices they make to allow that person to do a great job for us. So it's things like that I think hopefully make people feel a bit more like, no, we're all in this together. It's you and your family that we're here for. So.
Yeah, I must admit, that's one of the things that struck me. Actually, I've been, Menable have been working with Jardine Motors Group now for a few months, and it struck me that just what a sort of sense of a family feel there actually is. And I get the, obviously there's an operational requirement day to day, but I do get the sense that behind that is a real kind of connection with everyone being a bit of a family and being properly connected, which is great. It's very refreshing.
Yeah, I think certainly with great leaders of businesses that I've worked for before, that's one of the clear differentiators, is where they, where you do feel it's okay to say, look, there is, my son or daughter's having they've got a play or a pantomime or whatever it is it okay if I skip out, an hour early? And it's it's never even a question of, you don't really need to ask. Of course, we want you to do that. You give us enough hours, where you're not meant to be here. So of course we want you to do that. It's absolutely fair. No, it's and it's making a difference. You sort of feel that now, and I hope that again, where we are now, if we were to have this conversation again in another 10 years, it'll have moved on again. It seems that's a good trajectory, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not going to draw you on who you might have worked with before, but I mean, what you're describing now, it sounds to me like it sort of feels very different to perhaps what the archetypal part of the industry has been, that certainly, I've experienced and you may have experienced before. Would you say that was the case?
Completely, yeah. And I think that's because, the world of work is changing anyway, but I'd like to think that we are trying to be ahead of that and be sort of thought leader, being a business that's seen to be very much embracing change and a new way of working. I think one of the most powerful things that I've done whilst at Jardine is a lot of work around mindfulness, and a lot of those techniques we use all the time now, and that's making a massive difference, and also have cascaded it through our managers into, so they use it within their teams as well. And that's making a huge difference in how we approach things, and also how it allows people to open up and consider how they need to take time as well for their own mental health.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I guess we've touched on a little bit there is sort of the anxiety. Obviously, anxiety is a theme that's running through this particular week. And I don't know about you, but I see an awful lot of change in our industry sort of coming our way thick and fast, actually. And I'd probably go as far as to say there's a lot more change happening in the next few years than we've probably seen in the last 10 or 20. So that's undoubtedly going to make people a tad anxious. So any tips or hints in terms of, what people can be doing to either ready themselves for that, or be prepared for that, or perhaps not be so, knocked off center by it?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think for those individuals, we often say to our teams, what we do, we're not flying planes, we're not, we're not. It's not a life or death situation. So what we do is something whichever world we end up doing, it will be okay. We'll be able to do it. Trying to get a bit of perspective around it. I think the biggest thing is the fear of the unknown, of course, isn't it? It's
Right.
people not unnecessarily understanding what's going on. And I think what we know, and what we know within our business, certainly also within Jardine as well, is that when you're selling premium products, there is no substitute for the human touch. People want to, you, as much as you can see a car on the screen, it's not the same as driving it. It's not the same as sitting in it, feeling the leather, looking at the different colors of paint. And people are always going to want that, and therefore there's always going to be a place for the people who sell cars for us, the people who administer the sales. All of those people are going to be needed, and people are always going to need to have cars fixed. I don't think we've got to a world where they're going to not break down. It might be the software goes wrong rather than the bottom of the engine drops out, but there's still a problem that will need fixing. So I think when you break it down into those types of basics, I think that should give people, and does give people, I think, hope to say, well, you know what, yeah, it's going to be different, but it's been different before. When we've been in the business, I remember going when the internet first, sort of came on stream, and Virgin cars were like, it was the death of the industry. That was it. We were all doomed, and yet here we are,
We still are.
surviving and thriving. And
Yeah,
that's
no,
the thing.
indeed.
So I think, and I think importantly for me, and for my team, what I say is, look, we have to exude calmness here. It's down to people look to us. If we're running around waving our arms, and screaming, they're going to do the same. And I am supremely confident in what we do. Yes, it'll evolve, and maybe it'll evolve in a way that'll be good. When we talk about work-life balance, maybe it'll allow more flexibility for our teams as to how they work, and when they work, and where they work. But that's a good thing. That's none of that is bad for us, and it'll just take some evolution. So it's easy for me to say, and it's sometimes harder to convince people. But I think when you look at it in those terms, and you think, well, how much more can it really evolve from where it is now, where we've got this online offline experience, and what we see is people blend, and sometimes they want it, sometimes they don't want it. And I think for us, that's about, there'll always be a need for someone to be there, and kind of doing a kind of job front and center with a client. And that's what we need to sort of kind of reassure ourselves is going to happen.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point of these podcasts this week, really, isn't it? Is to, just reassure people that actually everyone's going to approach all of these things in their own way. But that, with the right leadership and structure in place, which you guys have, it's okay to open up and, be honest and say, look, I need some help, or I need some support, or whatever that might be. So you mentioned work-life balance there, Paul. Tell us a little bit about what keeps Paul busy outside of work then. Apart from the French bulldog that you had to evict from the room before we started in case he kicked off.
No, Reg the rescue dog is he definitely helps with my mindfulness and well-being. I'm married. My wife Lisa is an interior designer, so she used to work in the automotive industry, so she's great as a sounding board. Generally, if I slip into the sort of vernacular of our industry, she generally understands what I'm talking about, so that really helps. We've got 2 grown-up boys, so we see them as much as time allows, and their social diary allows as well. We love traveling. So for us, if we can be away and be traveling, we particularly love Spain. So we spend a lot of time in Spain when we can. Sadly, at my ripe old age, the years seem to fly by far too quickly. So can't believe we're already in May. But yeah, it's generally, as I say, we're sort of through the bringing up kids side of things, so we get a bit of time to ourselves, and we travel as much as we can.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, no, you're right about that time whizzing past thing. I used to roll my eyes at my now ex and deceased father-in-law who you always used to say how quickly Christmases were coming round, and I'd said, well, that's something to do with being in your 80s. But actually, he was right.
And I think, but that I guess comes back to something that what we're talking about here is some of it's also about carving out that time to just appreciate being you, and appreciate what you love in life. And again, certainly for our teams, we really push hard, make sure they take their holiday. That there's a real sort of drive to trying to make people appreciate the time they're not at work as as a part of what we do. So and to me, it's a bit of a failure if someone gets to the end of the year and they're saying, "Oh, can I take 2 weeks holiday?" And then, no, the answer is generally, why has that happened then? Because that's not what we want. It's not a philosophy here that you should be working all those days. That you should be doing something nice.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, actually, because one of our Menable clients actually acquired a business fairly recently, and there was somebody within that business who hadn't had a holiday for over a year, hadn't even taken a day off.
Yeah.
And you think, well, okay, to some extent, you can kind of understand some of the rationale why perhaps someone might feel like that, but it's certainly not going to do your mindfulness and your anxiety any good, is it, if you're not giving yourself time?
And I think, that again, when we talked about how the world of work has changed, it used to be a badge of honor, didn't it? If you didn't take your holiday. Yeah. How crazy does that sound now? It does. It used to sort of be able to sort of put that on your CV almost, and that sort of thinking really sort of sometimes explains why we were getting people burning out and making bad decisions as well. Even from their work decisions weren't great because they were exhausted. So no, I think again, it's very much about making sure the teams don't, again, there's no prizes for being at work 16 hours a day. There's no prizes for not taking a holiday, and no prizes for not putting your hand up and just saying, look, I need a couple of hours out. I just need to get a bit of admin done that I can't do at the weekend. So, we try and be as flexible as we can on that. So.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Now, you may have touched on it just there, but obviously we are in Mental Health Awareness Week. So what would be your top tips, Paul, for, as a leader, as, somebody who's there to, inspire and motivate teams around you? What would be your top tips for everyone to be more aware of mental health and, and to be open and honest about stuff?
Yeah, I think exactly that. I think there's two sides to it. One is if you don't feel right, if something's bothering you, is to speak up. I think we are desperately keen to create an environment where people can be open and honest. And when we sort of spoke at the beginning, there's very, very little that we haven't heard, seen, or experienced, and therefore probably means we can help. Almost certainly we can help, not even probably, to help you navigate through it. So speak up. There's no shame in it. There's no stigma to it. If we can help you, then both we win and you win. And I think as a leader, and to my team and to anyone who's looking after people, is even if you're not sure, just ask, are you okay? Don't if you think something's just not, that person's not quite right, they're not the normal self, there's just those simple words normally spark a conversation. And it's funny, I hadn't really realized a bit with one of my GMs. We went out the other day for a walk. His business was based near a park, and we went for a walk around the park rather than sitting across from a table in the office. And we had probably the most profound conversation we've had, because we weren't face to face, we weren't sat in an office, we were just out in nature getting some fresh air. And it was a real eye-opener, actually, because one of those things, you think someone tells you it and you think, well, why would that work? When you actually go and do it, getting someone out of their work environment, maybe you can't walk around a park, but you can go and have a coffee somewhere and just say, look, just want to check in, make sure you're all right. I think generally you'll unlock something. And if the worst is, no, I'm fine, I'm just having a bad day, then far better you ask and know that's the answer than not ask. So yeah, say be open on either side. If you don't feel great, just speak to someone. Doesn't matter who you speak to. It's 100% certain we can help. And if you see someone who you look after, just ask the question.
Yeah, no, that's amazing to hear. And I mean, I think you're absolutely spot on. That whole kind of "how are you" conversation, need to kind of ask that again, don't you? Just so that people don't give you the typical sort of "I'm fine, I'm okay, leave me alone" kind of response. But you and I first met when I did a talk, didn't I, way back in November, December time, I think, for one of your DEI meetings. And I sort of introduced you all at that point to our rev counter, which I just make a little mention of, which is the, perhaps shifting that conversation to where are you revving, using that rev counter analogy to get an idea of where you're revving, because like you've said, you wouldn't expect people to be burning out, just as you wouldn't rev your car's engine, at full tilt. And what you just described there, walking around the park, is very much that shoulder to shoulder ethos, isn't it? Of, it's far easier quite often to have that conversation when you're next to somebody rather than when you're face to face staring them in the eye.
And I think as guys, in an industry as well, guys, I think unfortunately do find it harder to have.
Yeah,
I think we talked about that, fun enough, on the DI event as well. And it, we aren't great at it, and not being eye to eye makes that, for whatever reason, makes it easier in the car sometimes as well. Sometimes I'll be in a car with someone and we end up having a conversation that's probably far deeper than it would be again if we were sat in an office staring at each other. So it's interesting how these things work, but it's 100% success rate for me whenever we've been in that scenario with someone. It's sparked a different type of conversation to the one we'd have in the normal four walls. So
yeah, well, long may that continue. So
certainly, yeah,
all good stuff. Paul, have you enjoyed being a Menable Matters podcast guest?
I have. It's been a great. In fact, I've forgotten we're on the podcast. It's just quite nice to have a one-to-one conversation. So no, I've really appreciated that. It's been good fun.
Well, anytime, the phone is always on. You're always welcome to have a chat. You know that. That's part of what we do.
Well, and don't be a stranger to us. We've got plenty of showrooms around, so you're always welcome.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you very much. Well, I'm desperately trying to get rid of a Velar at the moment, so if you can help me out with that, that'd be great.
No problem at all. I've got a lovely McLaren that I can do a stonking deal on.
Yeah, as the founder of a social enterprise, that may not be so good for me to drive around in that, but I'll take your point.
Well, it's British, by British.
Of course. Well, that's the answer. Yeah, definitely. Paul, you're an absolute star. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. So thank you very much for that. And we will be back in touch very, very soon.
Thanks, Stephen. Great to see you. Take care.
You take care. Thanks a lot.